All right, everybody. Good evening. It is Tuesday night. It's about 7 o'clock. It's time for our weekly conversations with Commodores. And I've got number 5. He toted the rock for us 93 to 95, 2,000 plus yards, 1,000 plus yards in 95. Of course, I've got JJ. I've got Jermaine Johnson. Good evening, Jermaine. Thank you for being with us tonight, bud.
Thank you, Bernard. I appreciate you having me on. It's an honor to be here with you.
And no, it's my honor, and it's also I owe you the why haven't we had you on here earlier excuse? And there's no excuse other than that's on me. Should have had you on a couple years ago, but we're glad that we've got time with you tonight. And this is going to be fun. We're going to just chop it up and learn about your story coming out of Carrollton. But before we do, folks who may not be in your current world or your sphere, tell folks what you're doing these days. Kind of catch them up a little bit on your life.
Well, it kind of depends on where you want me to start from. But currently, I own my own company. I run a 3PL, which is a trucking and logistics company.
Mm-hmm.
And I also still spend a lot of time consulting in the software and medical industry because I've been doing that probably for 30 years plus. So I'm a very sought out consultant in that world. So I'm kind of twofold. So I'm running my own company and I'm also consulting for other companies in the software industry.
How do you decide which hat you're wearing at what time of the day?
Just depends on what's the biggest problem.
You're a fix it guy. I get it.
Well, to be honest, yeah, I spend probably 90% of my job on both, even running my own company and also consulting, is fixing somebody's problem.
Well, logistics, that's that, no doubt, no doubt. And so you're in the Atlanta suburbs, or Atlanta metro area of Carrollton, your hometown.
Yep.
And for folks who don't know about Carrollton, how large of a city or how small of a town would you describe Carrollton?
Oh, wow. Well, Carrollton is about 45 minutes southwest of Atlanta.
Mm-hmm.
And for those that know the area, the biggest landmark would be West Georgia University. A lot of people know about West Georgia University. I probably currently live about 8 or 9 minutes from West Georgia University here in Carrollton. This is where I was born and raised. Population, probably just a few thousand shy of 40,000. But it is like most suburbs of Atlanta, up and coming, always growing, always has been. And that's Carrollton. But at the same time, growing up, Carrollton is a football town. Always has been. I don't think that would change. Myself personally, I have 5 state championships, all of them in track. 4-time state championship loser. But we always got to the big game. We just never had an opportunity to pull it off. But I guess that's why Vanderbilt, sought me out.
Well, as for those who are biased about their own home states, Georgia high school football is no joke. It's got to be in one of the top 5 or 6 in the country. The Atlanta metro area. Then you got Valdosta to the south. You got Carrollton and many other pockets.
Yeah, you know what? A lot of people don't know that Valdosta, which has always been a perennial leader in terms of football here. We used to, back when I was in high school, we used to scrimmage them in camp. And what a lot of people don't know, oh my God, we used to spank them like little babies in camp.
Oh, Jermaine, I cannot forget. I'm going to be getting in big trouble. 3 of my teammates are Lowndes County Vikings: Carl Parker, Boo Mitchell, and Wally Hubert. So I don't want to leave out Lowndes County Vikings as another team to be reckoned with. But a fun thing about Carrollton or near Carrollton that folks may not know, I think the place is called Banning Mills. It's where they have all the treetop tree houses that you can stay in, and they've got a river that runs through the property and all kind of hiking. And I did that one week, and that's a fun spot if you're looking for something different to do.
That might be something to do. I'm unfamiliar with that, so
Yeah.
you and I need to offline
We will
communicate about that.
Yeah, that's a fun spot. Well, Jermaine, you had clearly elite speed as a kid and as a youngster, and it came out through in high school. It was clearly
So
evident.
I was a 5-time state champion in track and field.
How did you end up at Vanderbilt playing football and running track, and not at Georgia running track or playing ball for Georgia, or one of the other big schools that clearly could have utilized your talents in either or both of those sports?
Okay, well, a true story is I probably broke 3 or 4 NCAA records in terms of recruiting. I mean, I didn't break them. The schools that recruited me did, but it is what it is. I was, as you said, I was heavily recruited. I wanted to go to Georgia Tech.
Mm-hmm.
That really was my school at the time. Then my secondary school was Colorado. I wanted to be a Buffalo.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, I thought about going to Georgia, but at that time, my high school head coach, his name was Ben Scott.
Mm-hmm.
And he did not have good relations with the head coach at the University of Georgia at the time.
Mm-hmm.
And so that kind of ruled Georgia. Even though I did take a recruiting visit to Georgia,
Mm-hmm.
I think at the time they were looking to replace Garrison Hurst,
Mm-hmm.
who actually I played against in high school.
Mm-hmm.
But the bad blood between my high school and the University of Georgia at that time,
Mm-hmm.
I think Georgia, we had 5 All-Americans coming out that year. I think Georgia might have got one of us.
Was Coach Dooley retired by then, or was he still at the end of his career?
It was the guy after Coach Dooley.
Ray Goff, maybe?
Yeah, I think it was Ray Goff. Ray Goff and my high school coach, Ben Scott, had a history, and they didn't like each other. And that spoiled or soiled the University of Georgia getting top 5 players out of my high school.
I do find it interesting. The 2 other schools that you picked, you would have been either a freshman or sophomore when they tied for the national crown in 1990. And both of those teams were solid programs.
Solid programs. But here's how that kind of went. Because I was recruited by every school in the SEC. So at that time, I think we only had 10 schools.
Yeah.
Before it went to 12.
Well, it went to 12, I think, while you were a senior in high school.
I think it went to 12. I thought it went to 12 when I was a freshman or sophomore in college. Because we remember they picked up South Carolina and
Texas A&M.
No, Texas A&M came much later.
Arkansas.
But South Carolina, Arkansas, and I think that made the 12.
Yeah, because it was 10 when I was there, and I graduated.
Yeah, and it was also 10 when in my freshman year, and then those 2 came in. That made it 12.
Okay.
But I was recruited with every school within the SEC, and then outside of the SEC were some of the most comical experiences I had on my recruiting visits. You know, like Clemson was very funny. You know, going out there, and my recruiting visit was an experience because they didn't do anything. It was not remarkable whatsoever. I mean, the visit was with a bunch of guys that played ball there. You know, Clemson, South Carolina is a very small school, and it's like they spent the whole time watching the Animal Planet. What's going on here? It's crazy.
Hysterical.
Then when you compare and contrast that to going to places like Auburn,
right,
Nebraska, Colorado, and other places where they just gave you the red carpet treatment, it was totally ridiculous.
Yeah. Huh. Jermaine, before we get too far, I want to welcome Coach Gene Wyndham and the Juice. OJ Fleming is in the house with us right now.
OJ Fleming, that's a name I hadn't heard in a very long time.
Yeah, the Juice is usually with us on Tuesday nights.
Well, OJ Fleming, I owe a lot of yards to that dude. He opened a lot of holes for me.
He sure did. He was a stud back in the day, and he's a stud right now. That's for sure. Well, talk to us what you remember about being coming up to Vanderbilt, and who were your hosts? Do you remember the visit at all, or what was the impression?
I remember my visit quite vividly because that's the only visit that the university asked my parent to come along and be a chaperone.
That's great. That's awesome.
Why I remember that visit so vividly, because no other school had ever asked me to bring my parent along with me.
Now, this was during the Coach DiNardo era.
Yeah.
And who recruited you from the staff?
Oh, I think he's passed away by now. Older gentleman. If you hadn't asked me, I could have told you his name.
Well, that's okay.
He was the sweetest guy, though. I can remember the first time I met him. It was right before our semifinal championship game, high school wise. He came in, he talked to me a little bit, and we were working out, we watched a couple of workouts. Then he came to the pregame scrimmages, and just, hey, you could be a star at Vanderbilt, yada, 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 And at the time, being that young, I'm like, I've got like 20 schools recruiting me. Who cares about Vanderbilt? Right. So his name is at the tip of my tongue.
It'll come to you.
It'll come to me later on. Now it'll just pop out and I'll say his name.
So who came with you from Carrollton up to Nashville for your visit?
My mother.
And how much of an influence was she about the decision ultimately to commit and sign with Vanderbilt?
It's hard to say, because yes, my mother and my father had a lot of influence on me at the time. I was still more, let's say this, most guys that were 5-star athletes, their dream and goals were to go to the NFL and play pro ball. That was never my dream, never my goal. I just wanted to get a good education and then see where life took me at the time. I just happened to be a world-class athlete. But I didn't care about that because that wasn't my deal. I didn't care about going to the NFL, none of that sort of stuff. I was more or less concerned about family and, having a family and, how I was going to be a good father once I did start my family and getting in a good career. But, playing professional football was never a goal of mine. Even though I did play for several years, was not my goal. So at the end of the day, my mother, I can't say she was the greatest influence because as soon as we get off the plane and the people from Vanderbilt met us, they shuffled her off. And I didn't see my mother for 2 days. The next time I saw my mother was when we got back on the plane to come back to Atlanta.
Wow. All right. Who were your hosts? Do you remember that?
Marcus Wilson.
Doc
was my host.
Quarterbacks. Yes, sir.
And who was the running back at the time?
Tony Jackson?
No.
Derek Payne?
No, he actually ended up going to Green Bay as a receiver.
Y'all help me out here.
He had just set the single season rushing record.
Corey Harris. You had two good ones right there.
Yeah, Marcus, Corey, Elu, Eric Lewis, and the fullback, number 34.
Carlos Thomas.
Those were my hosts. Those were my chaperones.
They wanted to make sure you were coming to Vanderbilt if they put those 4 on you.
Those guys, I was with them for 2 days. I didn't stay at the dorms or anything. I stayed in Carlos's apartment.
So Carlos coming out of Memphis,
Yeah.
Doc coming out of Louisville. I don't know where Elu was from.
Elu is from Alabama.
Oh, that's right. I should know that.
Yeah.
And Corey, I believe, was from maybe Indianapolis.
Michigan.
No, Bunk was from Michigan.
Yeah, Bunk was from Michigan.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, me and Bunk are still, we talk, well, we hadn't talked in several years, but he's a hospital president.
Yeah, he's over in the Columbia, South Carolina. No, Greenville. And I'm trying to
he and I, we've tried to do some business from time to time. But yeah, I spent my my weekend in Carlos Thomas's apartment.
Oh, that's hysterical.
It was like they took me off the plane, and I told my mother, I'm be fine. And the university took my mother, and I didn't see my mom for 2 days. We got back on the plane, and that was that, And then I was and my mom was like, "Well, how did it go?" I was like, "It was great." I was like, "What'd you do?" They showed me the university, told me we was going to be studying. I mean, they went the whole academic full thrust on my mother.
Did she stay over at the Lowe's Vanderbilt across the street from the school?
Yeah.
Yeah, they're still staying there, I think. Now, at what point, if at all, during the weekend, did you have some one-on-one time with Coach DiNardo?
About an hour a day for 2 days straight. And a lot of that time, believe it or not, it was watching film.
I have no doubt. No doubt. Now, I want you to know that the statute of limitations has expired for anything you may or may not admit to tonight. Okay?
Okay.
I've checked with all of our Tennessee lawyer brethren, and you're good. But that doesn't mean you have to tell us all. Did you or did you not attend any parties up in the press box at the stadium?
I did.
Okay. We'll leave it at that. Others have told about those stories, not naming names or you, but we'll just leave it at that. Was that make any impression on you? Those kind of get-togethers with all the guys and whoever else was there.
It did. The first one, I was amazed.
That's awesome. The guys, I've got JJ, number 5, coming out of Carrollton, Georgia. Played with us in really the mid-90s for Coaches DiNardo and Dowhower. Jermaine, what was it about Vanderbilt's program, not the school, not the academic side, the program, football program, that really said, I want to be here. I want to be part of this?
Well, you're asking the wrong question. The proper question is, what made you decide to come to Vanderbilt? And it's not what you think.
Okay, go for it.
You got to remember, at that time, I was a 5-star athlete. I was recruited probably about 20, 30 schools at the time. Tennessee was one of them. But my final decision actually came down to, at the end of the day, when I'm old and broken, what's going to give me the best advantages in life? Education. And at the same time, if I can be educated and still get an opportunity to be on the world stage, what's better than the Southeastern Conference and Vanderbilt University? That's what my decision, with all the women that every school threw at me, all the whining and dining and the red carpets being rolled out, it actually came down to, where did I want to be when I was older? And what school gave me the best opportunity to do that?
That maturity right there as an 18-year-old or 17, however old you were at the time.
18.
Is rare, because most athletes of your stature, of your recognition at the time, we're not thinking about now. They're just thinking about the next day, the next week, the next month.
What you got to realize is professional football was never a goal. It was never something that I thought I could reach or accomplish. I just happened to fall into it. I just happened to be good enough to actually make it.
Oh, we got another, I think he was a teammate of yours, 49er legend, Vanderbilt legend, Wetumpka legend, Jamie Winborn is in there.
Yes. You know what? Jamie and I actually got together when he was traded to the Rams when I was living in St. Louis.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think you guys are too far apart right now, but we can talk about that offline. Jermaine, did DiNardo make any discussions? I'm not going to call them promises, but did he make any discussions? Hey, you're going to help us starting this fall in the fall of '93.
I can't remember, but he never made me any promises.
Mm-hmm.
I can say that DiNardo didn't promise me anything. He did promise me that I would be, a help, but not that I would be starting or I would be this, that, and the other. He never made any such promises, which I thought that was great. And it was refreshing to hear that from him because every other school, I mean, I'll tell you right now, when I went to Indiana, they told me I was going to be starting the moment I hit the field.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that wasn't true. So DiNardo never made any such promises.
Was he a fair coach to you?
Not in the beginning, to be honest with you. My freshman year and the fact that I got redshirted, I hated the entire coaching staff. But once I, got to understand their logic and why they redshirted me and what the plans they were and what they had going on, then I understood. Mm-hmm. Because a lot of people don't know, I almost transferred from Vanderbilt after my freshman year. I was going to go to Duke.
Well, you were just led me into my next question. What prevented you from transferring?
The athletic director at the time, I can't remember his name. He's a black guy. I think I remember spending my whole freshman year not going to any games, coming home back to Atlanta, watching the team play on TV, getting redshirted, knowing that I was, in my mind, the best running back Vanderbilt had, but they just didn't want to use me. And I was like, you know what? F them. I'll leave. And
now you're not thinking of Paul Houlihan, are you?
Was it Paul Houlihan? No. Was he black?
I don't think so.
No, he was black. He was a black guy. He was the athletic director at the time.
Was he the athletic director or one of them? Like an assistant?
He was actually an attorney too. He was a lawyer.
All right. Somebody in our chat here is watching. Tell us who it is.
Yeah, if y'all know, tell me who. I can't remember his name. As a matter of fact, I think he might have graduated from the University of North Carolina or Duke himself, because he gave me a lot of advice on the North Carolina area. Mm-hmm. So anyway, what he basically did, it was sat me down and calmed me down. Mm-hmm. And he told me to think about the reason why I came there in the first place. And he also told me to think about my attributes and what I really wanted, and if leaving would truly give me something better than what I was looking for. Mm-hmm. And I thought about it, and I just totally forgot about Duke after that. Because I had even called Duke because they were talking to me before, and dude, they were ready to accept me, and I was ready to go. Mm-hmm. It was, I don't know if it was youthful pride was hurt, mm-hmm. because I thought I was not being utilized properly. Mm-hmm. And again, Duke, we're still talking about education. It still puts me on my goal. Mm-hmm. But he calmed me down and got me off that transition. So I humbled myself, swallowed my pride, went back to practice and shut my mouth and just did what I needed to do.
And you get through that freshman season, and coming into the spring, which was spring ball, did you notice a difference either in your own approach to the game or the way the coaching staff was looking at you as being a contributor for that next year?
Well, you got to look at it like this. Who were the running backs at the time? Corey Harris had just left.
Mm-hmm.
You had Tony Jackson, who was starting.
Mm-hmm.
And you had Cliff Deese, came in the same class that I did.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And me personally feeling like I was better than them both, but I just wasn't starting.
Mm-hmm.
I just wanted to prove myself. So I set forth and did so.
When did you recognize? No, bad question. We all have that welcome to the SEC moment or that welcome to college ball moment where either one of two things typically happen. One, you get surprised at either the speed or the strength of the game by the folks you're competing against, and that wakes you up. Or you have one of those moments of clarity where you do something that you expect to happen and it actually does happen against such better competition, and it kind of solidifies in your mind, I can do this. Not only can I do this, but I'm going to thrive in this sport. Did you have moments or any definitive moment like that that just kind of stick out for you?
I do. Remember a guy by the name of Shelton Quarles?
A little bit. A little bit.
Now, keep in mind, when I came to Vanderbilt, I was still a state championship sprinter.
Mm-hmm.
So I had never encountered anybody that was ever faster than me or could get close to me, even touch me. I don't care if you had an angle, this, that, or the other.
Mm-hmm.
But I can remember one of my early days in practice where Shelton Quarles actually tracked me down. And I said to myself, holy shit, who is this guy? So I got some respect at that point, realizing that the linebackers were damn near as fast as I was. And then you had one crazy linebacker that no matter what I did, what move or cut I made, he was always there. And that had never happened to me before. Mm-hmm. So that was my realization that, okay, I got to step my game up because this is another level.
And then what did you do in response to that?
Honestly, I went back to my roots. You got to remember at the time, Vanderbilt, when I first came there, because of Title VI, didn't have a men's track team. Mm-hmm. I said to myself, I've run track and football to me go hand in hand. Mm-hmm. Always have been, as far as I'm concerned, always will be. Mm-hmm. Even though Vanderbilt didn't have a men's track team, I joined the women's track team.
Come again?
I joined the women's track team.
Okay, I thought you said that. Now explain.
I went to Coach DiNardo and I told Coach DiNardo, I was like, look, this is, when you recruited me, you said I would have an opportunity to do what I needed to do. And track was a part of that. You knew I was a state championship track athlete. Then I get here, I realized Vanderbilt, because of Title VI or whatever, doesn't have a men's track team, but they had a men's cross country team. So I joined the women's track team and then became an affiliate of the men's cross country team. Mm-hmm. So I did that, sprinted with the women and did the whole training and cross country team with the men. Mm-hmm. And that got me back to something that I felt comfortable with. I felt back at home, and that improved my speed. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you remember, the very next year, my sophomore year, that was when I first qualified for the Olympic trials. And I wasn't even a part of any official team.
Wow. Did that conflict with any of your football responsibilities?
No, I got that squared away with DiNardo. He knew that I felt strongly about it. Mm-hmm. And he said, if they will have you, go ahead.
Wow.
And I think once I qualified, that year for Olympic trials, I ended up getting my first world-class sprinter qualification.
Mhm.
And from that point, it was history. And, next time I hit the field, nobody could touch me from a speed standpoint. Because I had gotten back to me. I had gotten back to what I'm used to. I had gotten back to my roots.
How much of that was mental versus physical?
80% physical, 20% mental.
Mhm. As athletes, we all carry an air of confidence about our skill set, about our abilities, whether we're competing against ourselves, trying to set personal records for times or whatever, or we're competing against the guy on the other side of the ball. We know we want to beat that guy. How did you carry your confidence? Was it kind of internal, introspective, or were you an emotional kind of guy that needed to get it out to process?
I'm gonna tell you a little story. This is the first time I ever got emotional because I'm not an emotional guy. I internalize and analyze everything. But at this particular point, everything was kept in, but I was making a lot of progress personally. Just got my world-class sprinters certification. I was moving up in the ranks in practice. I wasn't starting. Remember, I didn't get my first shot until I was a sophomore.
Mm-hmm.
And that only came because somebody got hurt, Cliff Deese. But it did come a time where I had just had enough. I was looking at my progress, internalizing my personal progress in practice versus the guys that were ahead of me, Tony Jackson, Cliff Deese. Mm-hmm. And I can remember one time getting emotional. I got so upset one day. I can't remember who we had just finished playing. And myself personally, and I was just coming off my red shirt. We were looking at film, and I personally was feeling like if that had been me, and I just kept saying, if it had been me, wouldn't have broke that. And I was just disgusted with the running back play. Mm-hmm. And we were in, this is Coach McConnell at the time, was the running backs coach. Mm-hmm. I can remember getting so mad, first time I ever got really that upset and emotional. And I said to myself, and I was talking to myself, but I ended up saying it out loud. And excuse my language. And whoever was in that room would tell you this is the truth. I said, if any of you motherfuckers ever get hurt, you ain't gonna get your job back. And I left it at that. Mm-hmm. And Cliff Deese hurt his shoulder, and I started ever since. Mm-hmm.
and
that's the only time I can remember ever getting emotional about anything.
Rock Batten says, "Keep on preaching." He wants to keep hearing it.
Jim, like I said, I basically said it.
Yeah.
If anyone you ever get hurt, you can forget it.
And Jim Aguiano says to tell you hello as well.
Angry.
So your freshman year, you're redshirted. You're considering Duke. Coach or the AD says, "Let's reset. Let's figure out why you're really here," and you reset. Then you come into sophomore year. You're not starting, but somebody gets hurt, and it's time to step up. What did you do to step up and to stay in?
I already knew in my mind I was better. Mm-hmm. I just needed to get the ball. Mm-hmm. And I think from the first moment I got the ball, I think that was history after that. I never looked back. Once I knew that I had an opportunity to get in the game, it was going to be over.
Mm-hmm. Did DiNardo think that same way? Did he have that confidence in you yet when you took over the spot?
I don't think he did until we played one of the final games of the year. When we played Tennessee, I think it was my red shirt freshman year, or whatever you want to call it.
So that'd be 93?
Yeah. he saw the way I was hitting the hole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think around halftime of that game, his whole outlook on me changed. I could see it in his face.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of was a non-verbal, I know I can depend on you.
Mm-hmm.
I got that from him, and he got from me non-verbally, just give me the freaking ball.
Mm-hmm. Well,
And I think from that game moving forward, he never
mm-hmm.
doubted my skills.
Mm-hmm. Well, that sets you up into the next season.
Now that's something you need to talk with him about.
Yeah.
Because that was a non-verbal cue between us.
Mm-hmm. Again, that takes some maturity on your part to recognize those things, as opposed to just being an angry player, an angry student athlete who's not happy with what's happened up to now, but you recognize that. It's a tribute to your maturity. And speaking of maturity, Jason Tomachek says to tell you hello.
I appreciate that, Jason Tomachek. And I do remember Jason Tomachek taking one of the longest runs of my career away from me for making an unnecessary block. But I love him to death.
Guys, I've got JJ, number 5 out of Carrollton, Georgia, with us. Now, I'm kind of speeding up a little bit, but I want to talk about motivation against certain schools.
Okay.
Because clearly you ran angry in that 94 Georgia game. You put the wood to them. And do you remember the game? Do you remember anything specific? Was there extra motivation? Did you feel slighted? Or was it just one of those, the stars lined up and you had a game?
Let me think back on my mindset at the time. I was angry not because of that game. Mm-hmm. I was angry because I don't know if it was a week or 2 weeks before that, I had gotten into a physical confrontation with one of my own teammates. I won't say the name. And I was pissed off before we even got there.
Well, you know, anger can be used for good or for bad. And it sounds like, at least for that game, you channeled it for good for us.
Yeah, I was upset before we even got there. To be honest with you, I was mad that whole week prior to that. A lot of people didn't know that. And I was still ready to fight anybody that would have said anything wrong to me that whole week. It just happened to be we're playing Georgia and we're going home, you know, back to my home state. So it wasn't any animosity, you know, towards Georgia. Like I said, Georgia was one of the schools that recruited me quite heavily. I was just mad. I was mad weeks prior to that game.
Mm-hmm. Well, I do know that at that time, it was the most yards Georgia had given up in like 3 or 4 seasons to a single back prior to that game. So clearly it was your time to shine from that game. And did that give you any extra motivation or confirmation in your mind about your skill set or your abilities or the where you were in the pantheon of SEC running backs that year?
Well, if you look at my trajectory after that game, mm-hmm. you will notice everything went up. Mm-hmm. And the reason why everything went up after that, it just, to me personally, showed me that nobody could stop me. Mm-hmm. I could do what I wanted to do when I wanted to do it. All I had to do was get angry enough, and it would happen. And that's kind of the way the rest of my career at Vanderbilt unfolded. As long as I was in a position to where the confidence was there and I didn't think anybody could stop me, quite frankly, they couldn't.
How did you channel the anger that helped to help you, not to hurt your game or not to hurt you mentally or emotionally? How were you able to utilize that emotion in the right direction? Because so many people would be derailed at just having this anger that they got to deal with.
Well, after that happened, it was an epiphany or a realization that I can still do what I needed to do without being angry, mm-hmm. and just use my skills and use my head. Mm-hmm. because I don't know if you remember, and if think about this, if you look at me before that game, the way that I ran and the things that I did, even my uniform, even my padding was different. Because after that game, I had such confidence, I changed my entire style. And if you don't understand it, look at every game we played before that, and then every game I played after that.
Were there any ball players either in college or pros that you tried to pattern your game after, or were you just that was just your style, unique to
That
you?
was just my style. I didn't have any. You know what? I've had this question asked to me before. Who was your hero, or well, who did you look up to? None of them. Nobody. Reason that is because my dad was always my hero. My father was always a person that I looked up to. Everybody else did the same as I did. They got out of bed, they put their, right foot in, left foot in, put pants on the same way I did. But my father hung the moon and the stars. You see, that was my hero. Nobody can live up to what my father did for me. So, yeah, I mean, Barry Sanders, Emmitt Smith, those were the figures at the time to look up to, and being of similar size, naturally, that's where everybody went to. No, I could care less. I was just going to be me.
Well, just being you, that redshirt sophomore year, your third year, I guess, you were no longer an unknown. You were no longer knocking on the door. You had established yourself in the league as well as in the country.
And that made it more difficult.
Well, now you're a target.
I was a target.
You're knocking on the door of 1,000 yards that year, 8 something, and that leads you to 95, which was really, I don't want to call it your breakout year because you broke out the year before, but you set some high standards, some records, one of the few running backs in the history of the Vanderbilt program to break 1,000 yards rushing in a year. And this is well before 13 and 14 game seasons, which some SEC schools play now. I mean, we played 12 plus a bowl game those years, but back then
I never played a bowl game. I wish.
I was going to say, you did it in 11 games, and I want to kind of take you to that year from a confidence standpoint. Let me ask it this way. Was there somebody on the staff? Was there somebody on the roster? Was there somebody on campus or in your life that kept you grounded, or did that come internally?
My girlfriend at the time, who ended up being my wife, who's now deceased, but yeah, it was her.
And if you don't mind me asking, how did she keep you grounded?
You got to remember, my girlfriend at the time was my high school sweetheart. So she knew all of my fallacies.
She knew you from way back.
I met her when I was, I think I was 15. She was 14. We met, so she had been through all of the rah-rah, the All-American, the state championships. She knew me good, bad, or indifferent.
She knew you through the red shirt. She knew you through that time period. Absolutely.
So she came to every game. She went to UTC Chattanooga, so just 2.5 hours down the road.
Sure.
So she came to every game and was always there for me. And she was like, "Your head's getting too big, baby. You need to reevaluate."
She's probably one of your biggest cheerleaders as well, biggest supporters. But it sounds like there was a healthy mix there to get your attention to say, we need to reset for just a minute.
Oh, yeah. When I got to, when my chest got too big and my head got too big, she'd stick a pin in it.
Yeah, a little humbling at times. But that's a special season, that 95 season for you and for Vanderbilt. That was a special season individually, of course, with 1,000+ yards. But did you feel like it at the end of the day, at the end of the season, were you satisfied with what you did?
No, no. I always thought I could have done better. I always looked at certain games where I thought that I could have done better.
Mhm.
Where I made a wrong decision here or a bad decision there. Yeah, it was always I second guessed every game I played.
Did that keep you hungry?
It did. Because I always thought I could do better.
Mhm.
And here's the thing is, at the same time, I never, ever personally went after some sort of record or accolade. It was all about me personally. Did I do good enough for me?
Mhm. Well, we kind of needed you that year. The cupboard was getting to be a little bare on the offense, and thankfully you were there. Now, was Dowhower your coach that year?
Unfortunately, I think, and you know, it is what it is, and I won't bite my tongue. I think that Rod Dowhower was the worst coach Vanderbilt could have ever hired.
Mm-hmm. I think they got caught up in we got to have somebody right now, but it's no excuse. It just is what it is. Did you know that, or when did you find out or learn that DiNardo was leaving for LSU?
You know, that really hurt me. And I'm gonna tell you why that hurt me. It hurt me personally, it hurt me deep to my core. Um, the week before DiNardo left, he and I had just had a conversation in his office about him staying. And he made a semi-quote promise that he wasn't gonna leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this was in spring because I was running spring track and I was either going to, I can't quite remember, I was coming back from the Nebraska Indoor Championships.
Mm-hmm.
And I can remember having this conversation in his office. I can't remember, I was asking for him for permission to leave or go to that championship, or if I had gotten back and we were talking about it. Either way, he invited me to his office and we had a sit down conversation. Because actually, it was when I was coming back, because I remember being at that championship and people were talking about DiNardo is going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And he didn't call that meeting. I called that meeting.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him, you know, point blank, man, are you leaving me? You brought me in here. You know, the offense that you've put together is obviously suited to my needs and purposes. Not that he had, you know, figured everything around me. I was just an important key of the eye bone, which what we ran at the time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And I thought if he left, that would be the end of everything that we had put together, that we had built together as a team and a community and so on and so forth. And I had a heart-to-heart conversation with him about that day. And he said, well, you know what? I'm probably not going to leave.
Mm-hmm.
And I left there feeling good and confident.
Famous last words, huh?
Yeah.
Well, how did this isn't a fair question, but I have to ask it. How did that impact you and the team going into the fall of 95 season?
You know why I didn't come back for my last year? I was still messed up about that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What was it that was the
Because Rod Dowhower was such a disappointment.
mm-hmm.
It was like, what's the point?
Well, did you make your decision before they decided to go with a different coach?
You mean before Dowhower came in?
No, after Dowhower, wasn't it Coach Woody?
Yeah, but I had graduated. I had thought about going to get my master's
Mm-hmm.
at Owen.
Mm-hmm.
But Rod Dowhower was such a disappointment. It was before I thought he might have been coming back. So I wasn't gonna play under that again.
I guess you'd made the decision to cut your losses and move on.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a proper description, but maybe it was time to pivot to your next thing in life.
Yeah, and you got to remember at the time, I was talking to Green Bay, Rams, Pittsburgh, Kansas City. These guys were coming at me, so I was like, "Well, what's the point? If I got a chance to jump to the next level and I got to deal with this guy no more, why not?"
Well, let's talk about that jump. But before we get into that part, was there an opportunity to run professionally from a track standpoint?
I did.
Well, that's where I want to go. Kind of take us on that journey, both of those journeys post Vanderbilt.
Um. Okay, left. What you got to remember is I got my world class sprinters certification my sophomore year.
Mm-hmm.
So what a lot of people don't know and don't understand, from my sophomore year to the time I graduated, I was in negotiations and talks with Nike, Reebok, and Adidas. But I couldn't reveal that because of NCAA regulations, rules, the amateur athlete status, and all of that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the standing was after you graduate, then you need to think about your obligations above and beyond that. So what a lot of people don't know is that my junior year at Vanderbilt was the second year that I retained and doubled up on my world-class sprinter status. Because what people don't understand is you have to make a certain time to become a world-class sprinter. And you can't just do it once. You've got to do it 2 or 3 times in the same year. Well, I had done that 3, 4, or 5 times over for the past 3 years. And so my senior year, I had already signed a contract with Nike that I could not make public. And so once I graduated, I was actually going to move forward with Nike, and then Pittsburgh picked me up on a free agency deal. And I switched the books up on Nike a little bit because I had an agent out of Arizona at the time. His name is Gary something other. Anyway, he was hyping me up. Oh, you're going to go to Kansas City 3rd round. It looked like I was going to be drafted by the Kansas City Chiefs in the 3rd round. But draft night came and went. It never happened. I think it was a week later when I got the free agency deal with Pittsburgh. But the night I didn't get drafted, Nike came and said, you know what? Hey, this is what we're going to do. This is your sponsorship. You're going to run with Team USA. We've already got the training set up. Since the whole 9 yards. I was all set to go with Nike. And then Pittsburgh came and I said, you know what? I want to try this football thing one more time. And so they said, okay, cool, whatever. Just don't get hurt. So I got the free agency deal with Pittsburgh. I signed with them, obviously, and was there for 2 years or whatever. Then I got cut. And I can remember when the day I got cut, Nike knew I was getting cut before I knew I was getting cut. Because the Nike representative met me in the Steelers locker room and said, hey, remember this? And he had my contract. He's like, you ready to go? What are you talking about? Now I realized they must have cut my ass. And but true enough, I got called into what's the guy's? It was a head coach at the time. Cowher.
Bill Cowher, yeah.
I got called into Coach Cowher's office. I was like, I already know, So it was a real short conversation. They booked me a first class flight back to Tennessee, which is where I was still living. Came back to Tennessee, told my fiance, well, actually, at the time she was still my girlfriend, that I'm going to Australia. I'll send you money. I'm out of here. you know, so that happened real quick. So it was like cut, sign another contract, fly out of the country.
Wow. Wow.
Quick, fast, in a hurry.
So was Pittsburgh your last football endeavor, or was there anything after that?
Yeah, it was, but I got calls from other teams in the NFL at that time. Also, Canadian Football League.
Mm-hmm.
And I think at the time the arena football was opening up really big at that. I think it was getting started up. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm not gonna get myself beat up for 50 grand. And I was just making over 100 and some grand with the Steelers. I'm not gonna get beat up for 50 grand. That's just not gonna happen. And then my contract with Nike was a 5-year contract for $1.3 million. I was like, okay, I think I can make this 5 years. I can make that 1.3. So yeah, I'm gonna go there.
I guess you kind of answered it. A lot of athletes, when it's time to hang up their cleats of their respective sport, it's tough. You lose part of the identity that you've had. You lose part of that belonging to a team, to a routine. Did that go through any of your thought process, or
no? Because Pittsburgh spoiled it for me.
Mm-hmm.
You know, when I got to Pittsburgh, I was still in awe of football. I was still in awe of being a professional athlete. But once I got to Pittsburgh and I realized that it was about business, it spoiled me. It soiled my heart. You know, I would have conversations with Jerome Bettis and some of the other guys all the time about, you know, why they still did what they did, knowing how they treated us like a number. We were just numbers, piece of meat. Guys realized that, trust me, there were guys sitting on the bench that was 3 and 4 times better than guys starting. But they had spent so much money on these guys' contracts, they had to play them. And once you realize that it is no longer a sport, it's a business. And I was still in the love of the sport. And once I realized it was a business, that in 2 years of that, you know, being on the practice squad and free agency and all that, and realizing that I was just there to hold a dummy and I was never going to play.
Took some of that passion a little bit.
Oh, it didn't just take the air out of the balloon. It burst the balloon.
Yeah. Before I forget, Jermaine, we got Keystone Cop Billy Smith with us this evening. And we got the mayor of Murfreesboro. We got Joe Peebles in the house.
Okay.
I know Joe just had his annual, very successful golf tournament. He shared a photo or two with us.
But he's never invited me, even though I don't play golf. But so that upsets me.
Joe, that's for you and Jermaine to deal with.
He's got my number.
Yeah. We've got a few more minutes, but I want to keep coming forward with your story. But where I want to pivot to is the impact as you've grown older that Vanderbilt had on you and your impact that you had on Vanderbilt. Can you categorize or can you describe any of those?
Well, the impact that Vanderbilt had on me personally has been honestly tremendous. You know, once I actually retired from professional sports and getting into the corporate world, the fact that I had a degree from Vanderbilt meant a lot. It opened a lot of doors for me. I'm not going to lie about that. So I've always stood on that, and I stand on it today. It still is a name that garners respect for what I do. And in this business, I run into a lot of alums that only do business with me because of it. So it has meant a lot to me personally, and moving forward, I think it still will be. Even today, owning my own company, I still run into the other Vanderbilt alums who own their own companies, and they, see what we're doing, and it makes making doing business with them much easier. Now my impact on Vanderbilt, honestly, I don't know.
Well, I want to throw this to you, and this is coming from an outsider who watched your career back in the day, played the same sport, same team. The impact that you had on the program, not just your on-field accomplishments, which were seen by the fans and appreciated by many who came and saw you play, but that left a legacy. That left an impression that long after you finished your playing days, you're remembered. And you're remembered for your enthusiasm. You're remembered for that fire that you brought to the team from an emotion standpoint. So I don't want you to ever doubt that. And I'm not trying to pump you up, but it's true. It's true that you're one of those lasting impressions, not just for your position, but in the last 30, 40 years of players. You're on a very short list of players who are remembered. And I think that's a legacy to be proud of, to me.
And yeah, and I am, I do know that I'm remembered. I will give you that. But to what degree, I have no idea. My own son didn't want to go to Vanderbilt because he thought my shadow was too big.
Yeah. Well, I know he's making his own mark. Big Diggs, Brian Diggs says to tell you hello.
Big Diggs. Politics. What I remember about Big Diggs. It's into that now.
Yes, sir. Jermaine, we got a couple of more minutes. I want to talk about life now as a grown adult, looking back on those times, simpler times, less. And you were on the verge of becoming adults. We don't have mortgages, we don't have kids, we don't marry, all that stuff. When you reflect back and look at those times, and you think about your teammates, or you're in a texting, or you see a teammate you hadn't seen in a while, what kind of emotions come up to the surface? What does it bring to you to think back about those times?
Well, to be honest with you, right now, the only thing I harbor in my heart and I think about on a day-to-day basis is my children. I want to leave them something, hopefully, even though my kids are already on their own path. I'm trying to build this business up, actually, for one of them. Hopefully will take it over from me if they want to. It's there for them, even though they're already on their way to be doctors and other things. But hey, it is what it is. But every time I think about my teammates and the history of all that, I feel a lot of pride. I love talking to these guys. When we ever get back together, get on the phone, they're my brothers. They always will be. Same with my fraternity. My fraternity brothers are just as important to me as my football brothers. Kenny Simon only lives an hour away from me. But we don't talk as much as we should. Gabe Gamble represented me in a legal case not too long ago. I still reach out and try to connect when I can. Paul Morgan, who's also, I don't know if you remember him,
from Mississippi, lives out in Hawaii. Of course I do. He's been on the show.
Paul's been trying to get me to out Hawaii for probably about 6 years now. And he's also one of my fraternity brothers. So when I speak to these guys and reminisce about these guys and have an opportunity to get back, it's nothing but a big swell of pride to just know that I was a part of something big at one point in time, and we all shared in it at Vanderbilt University.
It's rarely about the scoreboard. It's rarely about those wins and losses.
I don't even think about that when I talk to these guys, we get together. Football is the last thing on my mind. Now, we do always go back and share stories because that's our history together. But it's not about what happened
Mhm.
in those scenarios. It's about what we did and how we reacted to it.
Now, I want to challenge you on this. When y'all tell those stories, what percentage of them are actually true versus what percentage of them are what we think we remember actually happened? As we get older, the actual truth gets a little bit smaller and smaller, and what we think happened gets a little bit bigger and bigger.
I
But it
understand.
all produces
Yeah.
laughter and good times, I hope, for you as well.
It does. But here's what I like to do. Since I'm usually the focal point of a lot of these stories, I like to sit back and listen to their recollection of it
Mm-hmm.
before I impart my recollection of it.
Before you control that narrative, that's true.
Yeah. And I hope my narrative of it typically is not too far off from their narrative of it.
Mm-hmm. That's the beauty of team sports, whether it's middle school, high school, college, pros, whatever level you played. Team sports has that power that I think very few other parts of society can have about bringing people together for a time that was a little bit more innocent than the times that we're going through now. And it just takes you back to that time of your life that's a snapshot, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever it is, but it's the same band of brothers that always brings that back to you.
Yeah, you know the funny thing about it, what my biggest regret in life is, is my children know all of this, but they've never seen it nor have they experienced it. But they just walk around and they hear people talk about, oh, your dad was this and your dad was that, and they look at me as if it's just impossible because they've never seen me do anything great or courageous.
No, I'm going to stop you right there. Your dad, and that's what you're doing that's so great for the last so many years. Now, I know you're talking about your accomplishments in sport. I get that. Yeah, I'm just dad at home. We're all just dad to the kids.
Yeah.
And, you know, they don't want to hear about the good old days, but sometimes they need to hear about it a little bit. They need to be know a little bit more about the roots.
Here's the funny thing is, my son, believe it or not, does not like sports. Right? But when he was in sports younger, he was twice the athlete that I ever thought I was. He just didn't care.
Yeah. That's his path, of course. I get it. Jermaine, I can't thank you enough for being on tonight. Man, I could talk to you for the next hour, but I want to be respectful of your time. So thank you for sharing your journey. It means a lot to me and to the folks out in Commodore Nation and all your teammates who popped in here tonight.
I appreciate it. It was an honor and a privilege to be on the show.
Thank you. Hold on while I sign off, okay?
Okay.
Guys, we've got Commodores lined up until the kickoff in a few weeks. You need to keep coming back each Tuesday. However, we got a special one this Sunday that you're going to want to tune into. But please just keep looking at all the posts that I put in the group. We've got a lot of stuff going on. Get your tickets. Now, there's going to be a huge tailgate for the Georgia State game in Atlanta. I think it's the second game of the year. So you guys have got to get your tickets and get signed up for that tailgate through the Black and Gold Club. If you need any help with any of that, just holler at me. I'll be able to point you in the right direction to get you to George Smith. You guys hang in there every week like we always do. Anchor down.